Let me tell you something, and I want you to hear me out because the kind of day I'm about to describe, it doesn't come with warning signs or drum rolls or even a damn sense of poetic justice. It's just another morning, somewhere on Maple Avenue, when silence in the city feels too clean, too well-behaved, like everybody and everything is holding their breath, waiting for someone to break the spell. That's the setup. You ever notice how the ugliest messes start out looking ordinary? That's how Miriam Cole's day began. Just her silver sedan, some empty intersections, a folded newspaper on the seat, and a routine that, if you asked her, was more about staying grounded than making a statement. But life, it doesn't care about your routines, especially if you're an older black woman moving quietly through a world built to look past you until it needs someone to blame. This wasn't her first traffic stop, far from it, but something about this night was the way she glanced in the rearview mirror, not scared, not angry, just steady, as if she was done apologizing for her existence. The patrol car pulled up behind her, its red light flickering like a dare. No sirens, no barking orders, just a cold, quiet demand to surrender. And Miriam, she wasn't about to play the old script anymore. Let me back up a sec. In the district precinct not far away, Officer Darren Lakakia, that kind of cop, was leaning back in his chair, half listening to the buzz on the radio, convinced he could spot trouble by the way someone sat behind the wheel. For Lockcatch, unusual was never about what you did. It was who you looked like, how you carried yourself. If you were a black woman who seemed like you belonged, who didn't flinch, didn't shrink, that was enough to make you suspect. So when he decided to pull Miriam over, it wasn't evidence driving him. It was instinct, or let's call it what it is, bias shaped by years of authority gone unchecked. He cut into traffic, flipped on his lights, and took up the whole lane like it was his birthright. When he finally walked up to her window, his knock was sharp, his voice even sharper. "What's your name? Were you going at this hour?" Like he owned every answer. Miriam just looked at him, eyes calm. "I'm an American. I have the right to move." Just that. No trembling. No apology. It landed like a slav couldn't handle it. He called in backup, acting like her quiet confidence was non-compliance, scribbling notes, building a case out of thin air. She didn't budge, didn't plead, just waited, hands on the wheel, like she'd seen this all before. When Lockcatch told her to step out, she did so with dignitino, slouching, no fear. He tried to find some pretext, some excuse, and when she wouldn't provide it, he told her to put her hand behind her back. Now, this is where everything changed, and if you blinked, you'd miss it. The streets started to fill. People slowed down. A kid stopped his bike. A woman started recording on her phone. Silence turned heavy, then electric. Lockcatch, getting nervous, cuffed Miriam, hands tight, justifying it with the same tired logic old folks think they got privileges. But she didn't protest. She didn't cry. She just stood there, straight-backed, unbroken, making everyone watching ask themselves who really had the power. One twist, because life loves irony. When Lockcatch went through her bag, a badge slid out. Not just any badge, but the seal of the United States Supreme Court. It turns out the old lady he cuffed in broad daylight was a federal judge. Word spread instantly. Phones went up. Murmurs turned into shouts. That's Miriam Cole. She's the one who wrote the Justice Reform Report last year. Lockcatch tried to brush it off, called the badge fake, but he was rattled. The backup officer just stood there, visibly shaken. Miriam stayed silent, her stillness louder than any protest. Lockcatch, desperate, pushed her into the patrol car, thinking he could still control the narrative. But that video her in cuffs, his face twisted with petty pride, hit the internet before they even reached the station. Media watched. The comments exploded. If a judge can be treated like this, who is safe? TV networks dropped their regular programming. And at the precinct, Lockcatch tried to find any scrap of evidence to justify what he'd done, fake credentials, anything. But there was nothing. Miriam just watched him dig his own grave. By now, the whole city knew. Officers who'd once laughed at Lockcatch's jokes started to look away. Miriam's name trended nationwide, not as a victim, but as a reckoning. Students at the law school she once taught at played the video in ethics class. Judges who'd shaken her hand at galas couldn't meet her eye. Old cases, dismissed complaints, long-buried misconduct all started surfacing. Turns out, Lakaka's history was packed with similar stops, but the department had always closed ranks around him. No more. A young officer, the same one who saw the arrest, stepped forward to testify. She said, "I saw her being disrespected. I heard Lawcatch call her one of those old black folks who think they are the law. I was there, and that simple act, refusing to stay silent, sent a crack through the system. Investigators poured in, city councils called emergency meetings, legal aid groups offered their support. Not because Miriam asked, but because her silence, her refusal to bow, exposed the rot everyone else had learned to ignore. It all built toward a hearing public, televised, standing room only. Lakaka's defenders called it a misunderstanding, just procedure, but Miriam wasn't buying it. She stood in front of the committee, placed her photo on the table, and asked, "If this woman were your mother, would you still call this procedure?" The room went quiet. She named the stops, the patterns, the names erased from reports. She didn't yell, didn't plead, just told the truth. And truth, it has a way of making people squirm. The verdict came down hard. Lawcatch, convicted abuse of authority, racial discrimination, obstruction of justice. 18 years, no parole for 10. His assistant, for years probation, banned for life. When they let him out, the crowd didn't cheer. They just stood, finally seeing the cost of looking away. And Miriam? She didn't appear for cameras. She went home, made tea, signed petitions to reopen old cases, and when asked for comment, replied, "I don't need the system to bow to me. I needed to stand tall for everyone." In the weeks that followed, the city changed. Cops paused before every stop. Judges reread their own rulings. In classrooms, students pinned small wooden badges to their shirts, carved with the words, "Stand even cuffed." Not a movement, not a monument, just a quiet refusal to let power define who mattered. So if you're still listening, ask yourself, what do you do when power tells you to bow? And you know it's wrong? Because sometimes the biggest change comes from those who refuse to break even when they have every reason to. Now let's talk about it. Who do you stand with when justice is on trial, those with badges and titles? Or those who keep their back straight when the whole world tells them to bend? Drop your thoughts below, because this story isn't over not until we decide where we stand.